Kashi's cereal boxes used to say all natural and nothing artificial right on the front in big letters for years, and a real class action lawsuit forced the company to drop both claims and pay $5 million to settle it. Here's the stranger part. Almost every other cereal on this list has a trick even simpler than that one, and it doesn't require a single false claim. Splitting the sugar into 3 or 4 differently named sweeteners so no single one ever climbs high enough on the ingredient list to catch your eye. So today we're walking through 6 cereal brands you should walk right past, and 3 that are actually real grain, including a small Swiss company that's been making cereal since long before muesli was even a word most Americans knew or used. Here's what's actually going on. Federal law requires ingredients to be listed in order of weight, heaviest first, and that rule has been in place for decades, specifically so shoppers could trust the order on the panel. That part of the system works exactly the way you'd expect, but there's no rule requiring different types of added sugar to be combined into one line, and food scientists have known this for years. So a company can use cane, sugar, corn syrup, honey, and molasses in the same recipe, list each one separately by its own specific name, and every single one of them can land lower on the ingredient panel than a single combined sugar entry ever would. Here's the real kicker. The math doesn't change because the label looks different. 15 grams of total sugar split 4 ways is still 15 grams your body has to process, whether it arrives as one word near the top of the list or 4 words scattered further down through the rest of it. Your body has no way of knowing which word the sugar was hiding behind, only how much of it actually showed up. The one place this trick can't hide is the added sugars line on the nutrition facts panel, a single combined number the FDA has required since 2016, specifically because ingredient lists alone weren't cutting it. Here's the thing, once you know a cereal can look mostly grain at a glance while still quietly carrying a candy bar's worth of sugar in every bowl, you start reading the side panel first instead of trusting whatever the front of the box wants you to believe. And later, I'm going to show you exactly what that sugar actually looks like sitting in a spoon, using nothing more than the number already printed right there on your own box. Number 6, Post Honey Bunches of Oats. This is one of the best-selling cereals in the entire country, built almost entirely on an image of golden oat clusters and simple, honest morning goodness. Here's the thing, turn the box around and you'll find sugar, brown sugar, corn syrup, and honey listed as separate entries, spaced out across the ingredient panel rather than grouped together where a shopper would naturally notice them. 4 separately named sweeteners are doing the same job a single larger sugar entry would do if the company combined them into one line, which nothing in federal law requires them to do. None of them individually looks alarming sitting on its own. Together, spread across the list, they are doing most of the actual sweetening work in the box. At most stores, a family-sized box runs around $5.49. What you get is a genuinely pleasant, crunchy cereal that tastes less sweet than it actually is. Because splitting the sweeteners across several ingredients doesn't only affect the label, it can flatten the perceived sweetness on your tongue too, which makes it easier to pour a bigger bowl without ever noticing how much sugar actually came along with it. If you've bought this weekly for a year, that's roughly $285 spent on a cereal whose sugar content took 4 different names to stay off your radar. But the next one runs the exact same play, only with a heavier health halo printed across the front of the box. Number 5, Maltomeal oat blenders with honey, a value price staple in a lot of pantries. The box leans hard on 11 vitamins and minerals and a wholesome, old-fashioned oat cluster look designed to feel like a step up from a plain bag of oats. Here's the real kicker. This one carries 4 separate sweeteners too: sugar, corn syrup, molasses, and honey. An even wider spread across the ingredient panel than Honey Bunches of Oats managed. Each one, read on its own, genuinely looks like a minor ingredient buried well down the list. Stacked together and eaten in the same bowl, they're the actual reason that this tastes like a treat despite the vitamin and mineral messaging doing all the talking on the front of the bag. At most stores, this runs around $4.29. What you get is a crunchy, honey-forward cereal that genuinely earns its taste honestly, bite after bite. This brand isn't hiding what it actually tastes like once it's in your bowl. It's hiding something else entirely. How many different words it took to get there without the word sugar ever appear anywhere near the top of the list. If you bought this weekly, that's roughly $223 a year on a bag whose vitamin count gets top billing while its 4 sweetness sugar spread get none. Now, the next brand leans on fiber instead of vitamins to pull off the same distraction. Number 4, Kellogg's Frosted Mini Wheats. One of the most recognizable boxes in the entire cereal aisle. The packaging is covered in 48 grams of whole grain, excellent source of fiber, and 10 layers of wheat messaging, stacked one claim on top of another. Here's the thing, all of that is true, every single word of it. It's also doing a lot of visual work to keep your eyes off the fact that this cereal carries 12 grams of added sugar per serving, roughly a third of a day's recommended limit sitting in one bowl before milk. The ingredient list itself is genuinely short. Whole grain wheat, sugar, brown rice syrup, gelatin. But the fiber and whole grain claims are printed in large bold type across the front, while the sugar count sits quietly on the side panel where far fewer shoppers ever look. At most stores, an 18-ounce box runs around $5.49. What you get is a genuinely high-fiber biscuit with a frosted top layer that's carrying nearly all of the sweetness in each bite. The fiber claim printed on the box is entirely real. But a shopper scanning the front of this box for health signals will see 3 separate ones before they ever notice the sugar line tucked away on the side. And that ordering is not an accident of package design. If you bought this weekly, that's roughly $285 a year on a cereal whose fiber content is doing the marketing that its sugar content would rather you skip. If this is already saving you from a bad shop, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Now, we publish one of these every week, and the next one markets itself as the grown-up, less processed choice, using the identical trick underneath. Number 3, Post Great Grains Raisins, Dates, and Pecans, marketed toward an older, more discerning shopper. This one leans hard on real fruit and nut imagery, positioning itself as a mature, thoughtful step up from anything a kid would grab off the shelf. Here's the real kicker. Despite the less processed framing printed prominently across the box, this cereal carries 3 separately listed sweeteners: sugar, brown sugar, and corn syrup, adding up to 13 grams of sugar per serving, more than several of the supposedly less mature cereals it's implicitly positioned against on the very same shelf. The dates and raisins baked into this recipe are genuinely real, and they do contribute some natural sugar of their own, which makes the 3 added sweeteners sitting alongside them even less necessary than they'd otherwise be for a cereal already sweetened by real fruit. At most stores, a box runs around $5.99. What you get is a genuinely hearty, nutty cereal, with real dried fruit doing real, honest flavor work throughout the bowl. This isn't an entirely empty health claim by any means, but less processed is doing a great deal of positioning for a product still carrying 3 stacked sweeteners layered on top of fruit that was already providing plenty of natural sweetness on its own. If you've bought this weekly, that's roughly $311 a year on the grown-up cereal that turns out to need every bit as much stacked sugar as the ones it's quietly positioned above on the shelf. And the next one is the one probably sitting in your pantry right now. Number 2, General Mills Honey Nut Cheerios, a fixture in refrigerator-adjacent cabinets across the country. This is the single best-selling cereal in the entire United States, carrying Cheerios' decades-old heart-healthy reputation directly into its sweetened, honey-forward version. Here's the real kicker. Honey Nut Cheerios lists sugar, honey, and brown sugar syrup as 3 separate sweeteners, spaced apart on the ingredient panel exactly the way this whole episode has described. An independent ingredient audits report it carries roughly 12 times the added sugar of plain Cheerios in the identical serving size, with some direct comparisons finding it actually carries more added sugar than Froot Loops, a cereal named after fruit-flavored sugar rings. The box still carries the same cholesterol-lowering health claim printed on the original unsweetened version of the cereal. At most stores, a family-sized box runs around $5.99. What you get is a genuinely well-loved, honey-forward cereal that nearly every American household has bought at some point in its history. This isn't an obscure or niche product. It's the single most purchased one in the entire category. But heart healthy, printed directly on a box carrying 12 times the sugar of its own plain version, and reportedly more sugar than a cereal, literally named after fruit-flavored sugar rings, is exactly the gap this whole episode opened with in the very first sentence. If you bought this weekly for a year, that's roughly $311 spent on the best-selling cereal in America, sweetened with 3 different names for the same thing. Number 1, Kashi, long considered the gold standard for health-conscious cereal shoppers. This brand built its entire identity on the words all natural and nothing artificial. Printed directly and prominently on the box for years, aimed specifically at the shopper trying to avoid everything else on this list. Here's the real kicker, and this one isn't a sugar stacking story at all. It's a real, fully settled lawsuit with a dollar figure attached. A 2011 California class action alleged that Kashi's all-natural and nothing artificial claims were false, since the products actually contain synthetic and hexane-processed ingredients, including pyridoxine hydrochloride, calcium pantothenate, and a range of other lab-produced additives buried in the fine print. In 2014, Kellogg settled the case for $5 million and agreed to drop both claims from Kashi's packaging nationwide, not only in California. At most stores, a box runs around $5.49. What you get is a genuinely fiber-forward whole grain cereal that isn't lying about its underlying base ingredients. The grain content in the bowl itself is real and always has been. But the specific words this brand chose to sell you on, the exact promise that separated it from every single other box on the shelf, were the very words a court determined a company had to pay $5 million to stop using nationwide. If you've bought this weekly for a year, that's roughly $285 spent on the one brand in this category that got taken to court over its own health claims and lost. Here's a check you can run in about 30 seconds with whatever cereal box happens to be open in your kitchen right now. Flip to the nutrition facts panel and find the added sugars line, specifically not the general total sugars line above it, then divide that gram number by 4 to get teaspoons. That single combined number is the one place sugar stacking genuinely cannot hide, because federal law requires every added sweetener in the product, no matter how many different names it goes by on the ingredient panel above it, to be totaled honestly into that one line on the nutrition facts panel. Now measure out that many teaspoons of sugar into a small bowl or onto a plate next to your cereal bowl. For a cereal carrying 12 grams of added sugar, that's 3 full teaspoons, sitting in a pile before you've added a single ingredient of your own. Do that with whatever box is already open in your kitchen tonight. Watching that pile of sugar grow, teaspoon by teaspoon, teaches you more in 30 seconds flat than any ingredient list. Split 4 ways or not ever really will. Now, if you've made it this far, here's the payoff. 3 cereal brands that are actually real grain, the way the front of a box has always claimed to be. And one of them was inventing this entire category before healthy cereal was even a recognized marketing phrase in this country. But the surprise isn't that the real ones cost noticeably more at checkout. The surprise is how short and plain their ingredient lists get the moment the sweetener stacking disappears entirely from the recipe. Number 3. Familia, out of Obwalden, Switzerland, on the shores of Lake Sarnen. Annie Metzner and Georg Hipp founded this company in 1959, developing the first commercially produced Bircher muesli anywhere in the world, in direct agreement with the descendants of Dr. Maximilian Bircher-Benner, the Swiss physician who invented the dish as a health food decades earlier for his own patients. Why they stayed real shows up most directly in their no added sugar line. Whole grain rolled oats, whole grain wheat flakes, fruit flakes, raisins, millet flakes, roasted hazelnuts, wheat germ, roasted almonds. Every bit of sweetness coming from real fruit, none of it added, none of it hiding behind a second or third name. Sourcing real dried fruit and whole roasted nuts costs meaningfully more than sweetening with syrup, a cost this company has carried since a mountain town in Switzerland in the 1950s. The proof is the no added sugar label doing exactly what it claims to do, backed by an ingredient list short enough to read out loud in one single breath. Customers keep describing it as tasting like a genuine dessert without the sugar crash that follows most cereal an hour or two later. You'll find Familia at natural grocers and increasingly at mainstream supermarket chains as well, generally sitting in the $5 to $6 range per box. Number 2, Bob's Red Mill out of Milwaukee, Oregon, a name recognizable to anyone who spent time in the bacon aisle. Bob and Charlie Moore founded this company in 1978 after buying a long-abandoned flour mill, milling whole grains the slow stone-ground way while most of the rest of the industry was racing toward faster, cheaper processing methods. Staying real here costs the company directly, and it costs its owners specifically because in 2010, on his own 81st birthday, Bob Moore began transferring the company to its employees through an employee stock ownership plan, a process completed in full in 2020 that made Bob's Red Mill one of only a small number of fully employee-owned food companies in the entire country. That structure means profit gets shared with the people actually milling the grain every day, not funneled off to outside shareholders demanding cheaper formulations to protect a margin. The proof is on every single package the company sells. Bob Moore's own illustrated face and the words "to your good health" printed on hot cereals and muesli built from ingredient lists made almost entirely of whole grains and little else besides. Reviewers consistently describe the company's oat and grain products as tasting like something a real mill actually produced, not a factory formula optimized for shelf life. You'll find Bob's Red Mill at natural grocers and a steadily growing number of mainstream stores, generally sitting in the $4 to $6 range. If this ranking is useful, hit the like button. It really helps the channel cut through the algorithm. Your number 1, Nature's Path. Organic, out of British Columbia, now one of the most recognizable organic brands in the country. Aran and Ratana Stevens founded this company in 1985, mortgaging their house multiple times solely to keep it off the ground, at a time when nearly every banker they approached told them big cereal companies would destroy any small organic competitor within a year or two. Here's the kicker on why they stayed real. Nature's Path became the very first certified organic breakfast cereal manufacturer anywhere in North America, refusing genetically modified ingredients and synthetic pesticides in an era when almost nobody in the mainstream cereal category made that same choice. And no bank wanted to put money behind a company betting its future on it. And here's the kicker for your own kitchen. You can build a reasonably close version of their Heritage Flakes style cereal at home by toasting rolled oats with a small splash of honey and a pinch of salt at 300 degrees for about 20 minutes. No stacked sweeteners required anywhere in the recipe. We'll put the full method in the description below. Reviewers keep landing on the same word over and over: honest. People say it's the cereal they buy specifically because the ingredient list actually matches what the front of the box promises. Sweetener for sweetener, claim for claim. You'll find Nature's Path at natural grocers and most mainstream supermarkets today, generally sitting in the same price range as the Skip brands covered earlier on this list. Proof that a genuinely organic cereal doesn't have to be the expensive outlier it once was. Here's the one thing worth remembering. A cereal box can legally use 3, 4, or even more different names for sugar within the exact same single recipe, and none of them individually has to look alarming on its own for the combined total to still be genuinely significant to your health. The worst brand on this list is Kashi, which paid $5 million in a real court settlement and lost the exact words it had built its entire brand identity on. The best is Nature's Path, a family business that spent decades quietly proving organic cereal could actually work commercially at real scale, long before most of the food industry believed that was even remotely possible. Here's your one job for the next grocery run. Count every different sweetener name sitting in the ingredient list, one by one, all the way through to the very end. And if you count 3 or more of them scattered through it, check the added sugars line on the side panel before that box ever goes anywhere near your cart. Next week, we're opening up something that's sitting in almost every single refrigerator in the country, in nearly every household. And what we found buried in the ingredient list is going to change how you shop for it from here on out. Drop the cereal brand you still trust in the comments below. We're building this entire list together, one honest label at a time. Hit subscribe if this changed how you shop today. We'll see you in the next aisle.